Welcome to the I Create Daily podcast. I'm Leora Alderson.
And I'm Devani Alderson. We are your co-hosts on this journey of creativity and productivity.
I Create Daily is for artists in every genre of creating, from musicians to writers, crafters to inventors, bloggers to entrepreneurs. I Create Daily is a movement for creators serious about your art.
If you're into creating anything, this podcast is definitely for you. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Hello and welcome to another episode of the I Create Daily podcast. I'm Devani.
And I'm Leora.
And today we're doing another gratitude session. It's sort of like our coffee breaks. There's shorter sessions generally with just Leora and I. And we talk about people, ideas, or brands that we're grateful for, who have helped us, who inspire us, or that we just want to express gratitude to. And today we wanted to express gratitude to one of our 90-day journal and mastermind members, Lynn Hundley. She's a regularly contributing member in our mastermind group, and she always provides great humor, great insight, great quotes, and we're actually going to be discussing one of her quotes today. It is, "Today's plan is again heading for joy," by Lynn Hundley. So where do you go for joy? Where do you find it? And when does it find you? And that is going to be our topic for today. So thank you, Lynn.
Yeah, and one of the things that we're going to discuss as well is the concept, a little bit the semantics of the word joy versus happy. So just for the sake of our conversation, not for a debate on which one is more correct, but for distinguishing in this conversation, the way I tend to think of it is that joy is that underlying, permeating, all-pervasive state of being when one is centered and connected with oneself, as opposed to happy are the things that we do that we love to do, we enjoy doing that make us happy. You know, like we're going to our favorite movie and we're happy. You're watching your favorite Netflix and you're happy. You're having buttered popcorn with salt and Devani's happy. Or a plate of nachos and Devani is happy. But
plate, she says plate and she means mountain.
So those are the happy moments. Or Starbucks. What is it? We've been having an occasion recently, the smoked caramel or smoked butterscotch, whichever one of those that, on occasion, even in spite of the sugar, we might indulge in with but half the syrup, which is a tip, by the way, of how to get by with it being less bad for you. So
it's
anyway,
like half the devil instead of
the whole thing. So it's like those to me are happy things, like things that are fun and enjoyable. But there's another state of being that we have all experienced at some point in our lives, some of us more than others. In particular, as people age, either they go more toward that or they go more toward some of the conflict in their life. It just depends on which life trajectory they're on. For you to be on the best life trajectory for you, for us, that's part of what this brand is about, and that is to daily work on creating things that matter to you. And that will help set you up for living your best possible life. So where do you go for joy? And where do you find it? So I don't want to give answers exactly and start out with answers because my answers may be different, obviously, than yours, but I am recommending that you begin thinking on the concept. What is joy? What is joy to me? What are the things in my life I do that bring me the greatest joy?
It kind of reminds me of sort of the difference between desire and purpose. There are things that we desire to have or to be or to want, and yet those aren't necessarily always purpose things. Like, we might have the desire to go to a certain place, to travel to a certain destination, to meet a certain person, to experience a certain, thing, whatever that is. And yet our purpose might be something like we want to start a business that impacts our community positively. We want to start a nonprofit that impacts a cause that we're deeply care about, and so it's sort of like that, I guess, kind of.
Yes. And so I think that for me, joy has become a way of being that comes from the inside out, and it comes from the inside out through doing the things that matter to you in your life and through identifying with what those are, and spending more of your time there, and in particular, spending more of your time in inculcating and developing a, for lack of a better term in the moment, positive mindset.
Mm-hmm.
But it's about always, and well, really it ties in with our session for today and what it's called, and that is gratitude. So when it is, and whenever it is in my life that things have not been great, the effort to experience and remind myself of all the things that I have to be grateful for, and to really express and lock in gratitude into my consciousness has made all the difference in the world. So that is one of the ways to find your joy if you aren't already connected to it on a regular basis. It is to find the things in your life for which you are extraordinarily grateful, or just even mild passingly grateful. Like every morning, I'm so grateful for a hot shower. Having spent a few months in India years ago, back when Devani was born, which is where we found her in India.
Casually, they just found me.
Yeah.
Hanging around.
We were volunteering. My husband and I were in India volunteering. We had taken 4 teenagers with us to experience living in another country for a period of time and serving underprivileged orphans in this case. And she was one of the infants that was brought to the facility where we were staying. We were caring for her from her first day of life forward. In that facility, there was we were very fortunate. We were in one approximately 20 by 20 room, and there were 6 of us staying in that one room, kind of an open room with beds, cot-like beds. There was,
like, think camp cabins.
Yeah, there was one, well, even more rustic than that, but there was one separate room that could be called the shower room, because there was no toilet. The toilets were around the corner, and they'd actually installed Western toilets for Western volunteers, but you still had to go outside to them, and they were third world. So at any rate, the water that was in the shower room that was off of ours, which was much, much more than the children outside had, it was still cold water, and it was one spigot, and you ran the water into a bucket, and then we took a bath with scoops of water, and what we called bucket baths. You scoop it into the bucket, and you pour it over your head, and you wash your body, and it was cold. Fortunately, it wasn't, it was India, and it was a part of India that wasn't extraordinarily, it was still cool enough in the mornings. It was probably around 60s, high 50s. And that, the water it was a cold shower, a cold bath. And yet at the end of each morning's cold bath, I was still grateful for the opportunity to bathe and to be clean. And then outside our room, outside our window, we literally watched and have photos of the children in the orphanage who were bathing in from the outdoor spigot. They had more than some, in that they had a concrete pad that the water ran onto. But every morning, these children before school would be out there shivering as they were pouring, and actually they didn't even have a scoop. They were squatting down under the spigot to have their daily bath. And they would see us watching them. They would usually wear shorts, and the girls would wear shorts and tops. And they would see us looking at them. And I still remember the children turning to us and waving and smiling, huge grins, at us. And what really struck us about that experience of living and serving at an orphanage is that the children had nothing. In a way, they had less than nothing, because even the clothes that they were wearing were given to them by the orphanage. And yet they had spirit, they had life, they had each other, they had love, they had humor, they had fun, they had games, and they were always ready for a game, a smile, and a hug. So that's perspective on finding joy. It's like, what is it in your life that you can't but do, that you would do no matter what? Is it, whether it's helping someone, whether it's being a mom, whether it's creating and being an artist? Another more perhaps relatable book and concept on that is by Sir Ken Robinson. We've talked about that before. In his book, The Element, it speaks to the concept of everyone has something that they feel compelled to do, that they're here to do. And if that doesn't feel like you, and you don't feel like you have that thing in your life yet, don't worry. There are some of us that have a more compelling something than others. If you don't have anything yet that you've identified, then this is part of that concept and part of that discussion. And that is to remember what it is that where it is that you've been the happiest, where it is the things that have brought you the greatest joy in your life. And so one of the things you can do along those lines, if you might want to start that next section, Devani.
All right, so I'm going to read this. So one thing to help find joy, if you don't know where it's coming from, is start a joy list and keep it handy. And as you go through your days and weeks, write down all the times in your life where you experience joy, that deep and abiding happiness that permeates every cell of your body with lightness of being unshaken by circumstance. Your joy list is a roadmap for heading to joy.
Yeah. So if you're not sure, then we've all had those times in our life. So start making a list, and just, you might have it in a notebook. It might be on a document, but every time you think of anything that has brought you great joy that you experienced during your life, start making that list. And as it grows, you may be able to start to see patterns and connections. And some people have spent so many years so far removed from their original sense of who they were going to be in the world. Like, it could be many years working at a job that provided for you and your family, but which you didn't love, and which felt sort of like, spirits stifling of creativity and other things. And so whatever your circumstance in life, know that there is a way back to discovering the things that matter most to you if you're not sure of what those are. And if you're sure of what those are, then head for those each day, and each moment in each day when it is you start to feel derailed. It's sort of like, if you're riding, for those of you who drive, if you're driving on if you've ever driven out west or long country road where as far as the eye can see is this road straight ahead. And basically you just can keep just a fingertip practically on the steering wheel to keep you on track. But still, you need to keep that finger there to keep you on track, to keep pulling it back, or the car will eventually go off on its own. So what we want to avoid is our lives doing that. If our lives leaving the road of our of purpose, leaving the road of purpose. So heading for joy and discovering what those are. Okay, for me, like you and I were having a conversation earlier, and you're young, you're only 23, and I'm 50, almost 59, and so I've had a lot more time to experience cycles of joy and sadness and happiness and such in my life. And when I asked you a few minutes ago, like, what kind of things bring you joy? So I'm going to ask you now, and we can share that. What kind of things bring you joy? You weren't sure, right?
Yeah. I wasn't sure really how to distinguish it from just times where you just feel happy about things. And I wasn't really fully it's not something that I've ever kept, and I guess tying it to gratitude makes a lot of sense, but it wasn't like a concept that I've been carrying around or even think about. It's not like, oh, I feel joyful right now, or oh, it's not even really a word that I think about a lot, which might sound strange, but it's true. No. It's just not something it's really, I very clearly know when I'm grateful for something. I clearly know when I'm in a mood or in an attitude, and those are the times when I know I'm conscious about that type of stuff, but I don't think I've ever fully been like, oh, I'm feeling really joyful, and this is why. Right.
Well, and in a way it can sound corny, right? It's just like, oh, I feel joyful now. But thinking about it again, if we're just thinking about sort of like a deep and abiding sense of self and connectedness with the highest aspects of ourselves. So I would term that as the soul. So feeling really kind of illuminated from the inside out. And one of the, and there are different experiences we can have. Mostly it's an internal experience. Mm-hmm. There are external things that can help put us in that state. So for instance, you said gratitude. Well, in a way, gratitude itself is internal, right?
Right.
Like we may be driven and compelled to gratitude by things that do occur, by people who touch us.
But the feeling comes from inside.
Exactly right. And so that's kind of the difference in, like that's one of the prevailing nuances to me to joy, and that is that, and so when you, in those times when you've experienced it from being grateful, like, what do you remember about those things that, not just, oh, thank you, I appreciate that.
Right.
But like, can you really have this like really deep welling, tears to the eyes kind of welling internally? Like, can you remember thinking back how that feels inside? She's thinking. For those on audio only. No, and there's no right or wrong answer, so no pressure if you don't have any sense of it.
I don't really remember.
Okay, that's fine.
It's not, and I don't want to sound like I'm like not joyful at all either. It's just that I don't.
Don't remember consciously connecting to that thought,
right,
or that experience,
right?
Okay. Well, that's so it might be something for you. You could be thinking about, like, if I'm heading towards joy today, like today's plan is to be joyful. Today's plan is to head toward joy. And what does that look like? And again, that feels corny then to me. That what I typically, because I don't even usually use that term, but what I do often use is, what's the gratitude moment and what am I grateful for today? And usually, because that's been a habit for so many years, usually the gratitude comes without even consciously thinking that thought,
right.
Which I think is really the whole point of mindset things and the things that we do to enrich our lives. Like, many people spend each day and as much or more time complaining about what's happening in their lives, right. And the trivial things, as you and I have in this session, talking about the concept of joy and gratitude. And really, again, it's so important that what we put our attention on is what grows more fully in our lives. And if we're focusing on, like today, you and you're aware that I had another little incident, not unlike the previous gratitude session, where I was giving a shout out to our hosting company, WPX Hosting. But prior to that, I almost had a moment of, I entertained the possibility of blame, and we'll just link to that session without me going into it again. But a similar thing happened today where a freelancer that we hired had gone on to do work, unauthorized work, and billed us for that. And so then I needed to take about an hour of time altogether that I did not have to pull together all the different message streams between emails and Skype, etc., and elaborate on, this is what our agreement was, and this did not, this was not a part of what happened and what you did. And so my frustration typically comes in when I felt like I've wasted time and lost time, because, and again, at my age, it's all the more precious.
Finite resource.
Exactly. It's a finite resource. And so it was so tempting to be frustrated about losing an hour of time to handle something that, again, it was just issues. It was just stuff. And I reminded myself that that's one of the definitions of business is solving problems. And so, okay, this is not what was supposed to come up today. If this had worked out well, then everything would have been running smoothly and I would not have lost that hour. But did I really lose that hour? And instead, what I was able to do is take that concept and of converting the negatives to positives, and I was able to create it into a small post or article that went onto one of our sites that then was able to link to 2 other sites and 2 other articles. And so that, again, that one moment or those few moments of temptation to dwell in the negative that couldn't be changed, instead of doing that, I turned that around and converted it into action that was moving forward, that was moving ahead, that was doing something constructive and creating something. And it just evaporated. The negative feeling just evaporated. So to me, that was an example of, in that moment, I wasn't consciously experiencing joy or gratitude,
right.
But I did consciously head back in that direction by the choices I made about what it is I was going to dwell on.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, probably sums up the concept for today. And just wanted to mention my own thoughts as well, to the shout out to Lynn Hundley. So she is a woman who has worn many hats in her life, has been a writer and a pastor, and
a very entertaining writer,
and is beyond the second half of her life. And she is aspiring to new things. She is learning new things. She is creating a new brand for herself. And so it's like, no matter where you are in life, no matter at what age and what circumstance, it's never too late to pursue work that matters to you. And it's always worth being grateful.
It reminds me of Bilbo Baggins, who's like, I don't remember the exact phrase, but he's just always like every step out the door is like an adventure, a new adventure.
Yeah, definitely.
And he was a character that was like always up for a new thing, new thing to learn, a new thing to explore, a new thing to go find more trouble to get into sometimes.
But he didn't start out that way.
Right.
He
was like this
way.
stodgy middle-aged hobbit who wanted to just remain in his little hole. Yeah. Literally the introvert.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then he just ended up becoming this interesting person,
right?
With all these stories. So,
That's right. Good one. Okay. Well, thanks, guys. We hope you found some value in this session. Please let us know so we'll know whether to do more or less.
And tell us what makes you joyful.
Yeah, what makes you joyful, or what you're grateful for. And if you have a distinction between joy and happiness in your life. So, I did want to say one more thing, Devani. It's a little bit of a tribute to you as my daughter, because one of the places as a parent, and I think all parents can relate, that you feel joy is, when you have your child and loved one in your lap, leaning their head against your chest, then that is the time in your life that you feel just a deep and abiding joy. So.
All right,
guys.
And with that.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us for the I Create Daily podcast. Please let us know what creatives you would like us to interview and what topics you would be interested in hearing more about.
And if you enjoyed this show, please leave a review on iTunes. We value your feedback. We read all the reviews, and it just helps us get the word out on the I Create Daily podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.